a chat with Hive and Wellness. Let me just pull up what they sent me, actually. Hive and Wellness. I was hoping to get a response from you to it. Here we go. Mr. Mulvaney has previously agreed not to publish certain damaging matters relating to Hive and Wellness and its products as a result of legal proceedings. Recent social media posts and comments from Mr. Mulvaney are completely erroneous and without factual merit. We are considering further action against Mr. Mulvaney regarding these recent social media publications. That's what the statement says. So I wanted to ask you about it. I was asking them what specifically, which posts they were referring to. One of them seems to be on the Save the Bees social media pages, where I think you say that, hang on, let me pull it up here. Yes, so one of them seems to be a video that you put to your page, and the other seems to be a photo where you talk about Benjamin Netanyahu, I believe. But I guess just your raw reaction to what they've said there. I mean, have you received legal...
Yeah, thanks. I can give you some context, and you've probably done some of your own research, but I think the first litigation letter I got from Capilano was in 2014, so it's going back a long way. At the time, I was as shocked as a lot of Australians would have been that Capilano were importing honey. I sort of didn't believe it, and then I went out to Maryborough, where they keep the honey. A truck driver had tipped me off and said he thought it was an absolute disgrace that Capilano were bringing in so much Chinese honey. So I went out there myself and I asked the CEO Ben McKee for an interview. I asked, it was sort of an open day for a beekeeping club, and I worked out that there were, heaps and heaps of Chinese honey, and they're meant to be working for 500 beekeeping families. So I did a short video. I got kicked out, but I stood out the front. I took a video. That video was early sort of Facebook days, but I think it amassed, 1 million views or something. And then I copped a letter saying that they would sue me if I didn't take down material. What was interesting was they chose material that had gone viral. Another article I wrote was how imported honey would risk our own bees by bringing in diseases, and they subsequently tried to take that one down. I think at the time I was an accidental journalist, but over the years they've probably had takedown orders for 70 articles or so. But so this has been an ongoing thing. Anyway, after the bushfires, we were both sort of in a vulnerable position for beekeepers. A lot of beekeepers were going out of business. And we sort of we shook hands over the matter, and they agreed not to import honey again. And this went on for about 6 months, and they got rid of a brand called Lowry. And if you Google that, ABC covered the story. At the time, which was a bit of a betrayal, Jodie Goldsworthy stood up and took all the praise for my 10 years of effort. And there was another guy called Robert Costa. And Robert Costa did testing, and really sophisticated, it's called NMR testing, where it's a modern testing where they spin the honey so quickly they can work out whether it's honey or not. And what they worked out through these tests was that some of the honey wasn't honey at all, and there was a product recall on the Lowry brand. 6 months out of...
I understand with that particular methodology, the ACCC throughout its investigation, because it ruled that method was not sufficiently reliable, is that right?
No, that's not the complete truth, because this was in a time when I was about to consider taking it to trial. COVID hit around that same time too. I'm actually probably resentful of the fact that we didn't go to trial because a lot of this stuff is left unturned. But according to the labs that I spoke to, the lab said what they could prove was there was stuff in the honey other than honey. And it seemed to me that the ACCC had a lot of pressure on them to discount this story. Now, this story is going to get better as we lead on, so I'll tell you more. So it's very hard to get support. I've got a petition with 300,000 signatures that says, please put country of origin on honey. And Senator Rennick took that petition to Parliament last year. And, it's funny, I spoke to his team and I said, well, what happens now? And she goes, well, it's not a referendum. And so from there, it was very hard for me to even take it on again because I've been battling for 10 years and Capilano agreed not to import honey, but they still are obviously importing honey. And sorry, someone at the door. But so they started importing honey again, and they were selling it under a different brand. They made a whole new brand called Cloverdale Honey, and on that initially they put from Argentina, but now they're not putting any country of origin on it. And at that time, I've written a couple of articles, but I'd pretty much forgotten about the whole thing and just, promoted bees and local beekeepers. But earlier this year, I was in a supermarket and a guy said, what honey should I buy? And I said, video me. And that went on TikTok. And I didn't really use TikTok, so it had 700,000 views. It's still there on TikTok for you to look at. And I got a legal letter from that. And the legal letter said something like, you're not allowed to talk about this topic, but I'm under no NDA in regards to telling people that I was sued by Capilano. In fact, when we did have an agreement, it was that I had to tell people that, the court case was over. That's what we agreed upon, that we worked things out. So my understanding was, and I can probably find you the letter, but at one point they wrote to their beekeepers and they promised their beekeepers they wouldn't start importing honey again. So at the time when I thought we'd work things out, it was under the assumption that they weren't going to bring imported honey back in. In regards to the recent post, I think it's had over 100,000 views on Instagram, with the Rothschilds selling Capilano to the highest bidder. They're just the facts. So if you go to the Financial Review, Capilano have hired the Rothschilds firm to sell Capilano. I don't know.
One of the things you say in the post is that Israel is paying Australian foreign ministers to turn a blind eye to imported Chinese honey being sold in Australia.
I don't know if that. I don't actually know if that's true. Can you read the article specifically, word for word? And I'll that doesn't quite sound right to me. I can have a look myself.
Israel plays a key role with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's close ties to Chinese leader Xi Jinping, ensuring the deal's success. Profits flow back to Tel Aviv, while Australian foreign ministers' pockets lined with payouts look the other way. Ivan Wellness, also behind Barnes Natural and West Cabiz, pushes 90% imported honey under brand Honeyflow, misleading consumers. As China's wealthy saver Australian pure nectar, locals get cheap suspect blends and beekeepers face ruin. This quiet heist of Australia's honey wealth raises questions: who truly controls the flow of this golden resource and at what cost to the nation?
Beautiful, yeah, absolutely. So, of course, there would be profits within the deal. I'm pretty sure that Rothschilds, because I asked AI to research the history of the Rothschilds, and they're a really successful um, business, family business that has originated from Israel, I'm pretty sure, and they're the ones who are brokering the deal with China, and they also did a deal with Egmont honey in New Zealand, where they also sold New Zealand honey. Where the massive concern is, and obviously you've got to put a lot of rhetoric into articles for people to read them. So you could probably tell that article is quite powerful. But what's at stake is even worse. What Capilano have been doing is they buy apiaries and leases. So they have these, it's basically the best beekeeping areas in Australia. And for beekeepers to use that, they have to sell the honey back to Capilano. This happens in WA, and it happens in an area at Evans Head where they got the highest quality Manuka in the world. And so I'm, really annoyed that honey or those areas are basically going to be owned by a foreign investor. And that honey that could be going on to the lips of the Australians is going to be going on the lips of people from all sorts of countries. Maybe Israel, maybe China, but it's wealthy people that are going to be getting this honey. And I grew up with Capilano. I grew up when it used to be yellow box and high quality. It's nowhere near that flavour that it used to be.
Another thing that you say in this post that I think Hive and Wellness took issue with, in 2018, tests revealed Hive and Wellness's Alauri brand was adulterated, though the company denied it. So I understand that as part of your legal settlement in 2020, you agreed not to repeat claims about adulteration.
No, I said that they denied it. So that wasn't that wasn't part of the agreement. The agreement was, and the agreement actually, I may as well not totally. I'll choose my language because I don't want to breach any gag orders. There are issues in the environment. For instance, at the moment, there's a fire ant poisoning program, and in the environment, poisons get dumped on pollen and nectar. And for some beekeepers in Australia, sometimes those poisons like glyphosate and other things will end up in honey. I'm not saying that they've ended up in Capilano's honey, but I'm saying in general, in Australia, it is possible that neonicotinoids, fipronil, glyphosate and other things could end up in honey. And that was pretty much, when you're talking about, agreements, that's the line. That area is maybe what we're more referring to than discussing whether they pass the test or not. And so...
Yeah, I gather that there's been some dispute about the test's effectiveness. You mentioned that, you felt as though you were concerned that the ACCC had pressure to downplay the effectiveness.
I'll tell you a true story. So I rang the labs in Western Australia that were working with the ACCC, and I got a call on a private number, and this guy was very cagey, and he said, "You've got to realise what Robert's got to realise," and you may want to ring Robert Costa, or you should if you're a good journalist, if he's still alive. I'm pretty sure he's still alive. He was ropeable. He spent $1 million on testing. He got, I think it was Goldman Sachs, some Sydney law firm, to make sure it was paper tight, definitely you know, syrups within the testing. And it wasn't only the Alarie brand, it was also all the Aldi brand, Bramwell's brands. There was lots of them that failed the test. That was waterproof from the labs and from Robert Costa. And this guy said, he basically felt guilty. He rang me and then he got paranoid that I was recording the phone call, and he said, look, and ended up, you know, not wanting to go on the record. But that's a true story.
Yeah, right. So he was disappointed with how it got essentially thrown out or discredited.
Well, Robert Costa was furious because you got to understand where this is coming from. He's a massive pollinator, and he's whether it's almonds, other food. If beekeepers can't make a decent living because of this imported honey they're competing with, or fake honey they're competing with, that's Australia's food production. So that's why he's invested $1 million in testing, because if we can lift the honey price from $4.50 to what they really deserve, like $8 or $10, it changes the livelihoods of all these people. It enables people to become beekeepers and have a good livelihood, and then Australia gets the pollination benefit as well.
Another one of the comments you have here, Chinese honey diluted with rice or corn syrup is being sold on Australian shelves, passed off as Australian.
Great thing, and as a good journalist, I really want you to follow this up, because if you don't follow this up, I'm going to get pissed off. Last year, ARBIC, the Australian Honey Board Industry Council, ran a big campaign amongst beekeepers. All the beekeepers chipped in that are members of ARBIC to say, can you test the supermarket honey again? I've received leaked information that had failed drastically again. ARBIC, Channel 7 have already contacted ARBIC, a journalist there. They asked him for comment, and ARBIC said, because we're concerned that last time this happened, people stopped consuming honey from the supermarket, we don't want to release the results. And so I don't know if I'm going to have to get those results through Freedom of Information. But what will happen is people won't get their honey from the supermarket. They'll sort out beekeepers directly, and people like me will benefit, or people on the honey map that I created will benefit. Will you do that? Will you chase up ARBIC and tell me what they say?
I can send media inquiries. I'll see if I get any better luck than journalists before me. By the way, I saw that one of the concerns by one of your followers, actually, on the bottom of your posts, is that the post about Benjamin Netanyahu, paying off Australian foreign ministers, that was essentially amounting to a Jewish conspiracy theory. They were sort of visibly a bit uncomfortable by some of those claims. Where is that coming from?
So I went to the synagogue after the firebombing. You know, I've got very close Jewish friends. I also follow the Jewish Council on Instagram. That's the name of their account. And I'm also a fan of Kanye West. I'm also a fan of free speech in Australia. And I'm also obviously anti-fake honey. Now, if you look at my most recent post about ban Netanyahu, he's a war criminal. I think he is a war criminal. I think he's a genocidal maniac. I love Jewish people, but that guy, I would put as worse than Hitler. I cannot, and I'm a big fan of Antoinette Malouf. I think the way ABC treated her was devastating. I also think the way ABC have reacted, we better have watertight clauses of what ABC staff should do on social media. Like, that is, that isn't the result. What the result should have been was, yes, there's been some despicable acts made by the IDF and Israel, but instead, the pressure's coming back to journalists. It's got very bad, the pressure that some journalists have been under not to speak about the genocide that's going on.
Yeah, sure. A lot of people people would agree with you on that front. But going back specifically to the claim that Israel is essentially bribing Australian foreign ministers to turn the other.
Well, that's an interesting one. That what is? I wouldn't say. Did I say bribe in the word? If I use that terminology, because I think there's huge Israeli influence on Australian ministers. You're massive, and I'm working on an article. I don't know if I'll write it or not. I'm trying to think of the federal minister's name, but it was someone I was really a fan of, Mark Dreyfus, or anyway, he's a very left, I guess, Labor-leaning person. That's really I think his parents, Mark Dreyfus, is that his name? His parents survived the Holocaust as a refugee. His family moved here. He's done very well for himself, and he's very welcoming of refugees. But now I see this situation with Benjamin Netanyahu causing a lot of people to flee countries as refugees, and then they're welcomed here, and then you get this uprising of the Free Palestine movement, and I'm like, it's creating a lot of disruption in our country, and we're a very welcoming multicultural country, and I don't like to see the fighting that Australia is going through at the moment. I'd like us all to get along in harmony again, but that's not going to happen unless someone calls out Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, I was a bit fierce the other day in the article I wrote about him, but I'm going to do a backup article and you can fact check this. He was going to New York selling Israeli and bio fake honey. He's a salesman of bio fake honey in America and globally. And look, Israel are the leading people on fake bees that can do the pollination in case bees die. And so in terms of Israeli pressure on look, I don't know what you call it, manna from heaven, that I'm in a situation where Rothschilds are actually brokering the deal. Like, it wasn't meant to be like that. I was sort of shocked that an asset like Capilano, an Australian asset that can be sold.
Hyven Wellness has bought Byron Bay honey, and then you claim that the honey in Byron Bay honey doesn't actually come from Byron Bay. So that's a claim that the company has
refuted.
Yes. So I mean.
So I just want this on the record. They are saying that all the honey in Byron Bay honey comes from Byron Bay, or they're refuting that they bought Byron Bay honey.
Well, the Byron Bay
brand.
Let me rephrase. Yeah, the Byron Bay brand still insists that 100% of the honey in Byron Bay.
Well, I've heard from the original people who owned it that they weren't even beekeepers themselves, and then that they're just packers. They would just pack the honey. So I don't know how far they'd want to go to testing it, but I've got pretty good authority that all that honey in the Byron Bay container doesn't come from Byron Bay.
Okay.
I would put my reputation on the honey that they're selling in the Byron Bay container. One, they don't say it's Capilano owned. Well, they don't say Hyven Wellness on the label. That's deceptive in itself. But I'm telling you that I think if we tested that honey, and you can do good location testing, and as a good journalist, you should probably do these types of things. Let's test it, see if the location is Byron Bay, and then see what they respond when we find out it's not.
Yeah, sure, okay. I don't even know where I'd begin to test to see whether the Byron Bay honey is actually from Byron Bay. I guess that's an industry.
Well, you go back to Capilano and say you're willing to ride a stat deck or something that all that honey in Byron Bay honey is actually from Byron. Who are the beekeepers from Byron Bay that sell you that honey? It's very easy journalism. You know, like seriously, mate, that's what you should follow up with, because I don't just make crazy claims. I'm in a bit of a more difficult situation to you because I'm a social media person, and I have to write things in a certain way that reaches people because whereas you have a door to a huge audience, I've got to manufacture mine myself.
Sure. Going back to what Hyven Wellness said, so they've essentially accused you of breaching your agreement to not publish damaging matters relating to Hyven Wellness.
Yeah, that's a pretty weird statement that you've just said. Like damaging, like that is too broad. And one thing.
Specifically, you repeating claims that their honey is adulterated, for example.
Yeah, but we read the language there, and I'd actually used different language where I said that that some labs said that it was adulterated, but they never admitted that it was adulterated.
Sure.
So don't going into your article writing stuff that's not true, please. Because
sure.
I'll just tell you something else. ABC wrote an article about me earlier this year, and Save the Bees Australia. You can probably put this, because and they've actually put a complaint into my Instagram that I'm annoyed about too, because they said that I don't know if it's copyright or someone's image or something. But anyway, on this topic, they said that they wrote an article without even calling me. At least you've called me. So I appreciate that, but that was to do with the fire ant poisoning program. And something else you could follow up about that is that they made an announcement today that organic farmers should never have had the poison put on their properties, and that and so that's a completely different topic. You can call me back about that one.
Yeah, sure. About the Stop the Toxic Fire Ant program group. Were you one of the founders of that group by any chance?
I was the founder.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So I can tell you that story too. I went to the Senate inquiry. I got invited there. At the time, it was to do with when Varroa hit. They decided this crazy idea to put poison out in native forests to kill all the bees, and they'd kill all the bees, and by that way they would kill the host of the Varroa, and they ended up just doing a lot of damage to the native wildlife by putting that poison out into the Newcastle area and other areas, and it cost an absolute fortune. And we know how that ended up, with collapses of honeybees in all around Australia. I'm expecting all my bees to be dead within the next couple of years, like they have in Newcastle, and now a lot of people in Byron Bay's bees are actually dying.
Yeah, right. Because the other issue, a little bit separate, that I was hoping to ask you about. So I've been chatting with the National Fire Ant Eradication Program about some of the claims made by Save the Bees Australia. So I've got a list here. So one of the claims that they dispute is pyriproxyfen, one of the chemicals used in the fire ant bait, causing microcephaly in babies. So they say that this is a claim that is not supported by credible scientific evidence.
Well, there is scientific evidence in regards to that, and if you're a journalist, you'll be fair, and you'll do that research, and you'll post both the studies of whether it is the cause of microcephaly or it's not, and you'll go into broadly. But I don't know. I don't know if I just say it's very, very risky to get into the water supply, and it can cause birth defects. And I did recently, there was this dreadful story about green frogs showing deformities, and they're in the same areas that poison pyriproxyfen has been dropped, and S-methoprene has been dropped. And one of the side effects, it's actually when I researched this at the start, was deformed frogs. That was one of the things that came up immediately when I researched this. So the other thing I'll say on that is, but all the scientists I've spoken about this, mainly in America, say you should never prophylactically ever put fire ant poisons down. So that means that you should site a nest before you use the poisons. You should never deploy these poisons by drones and helicopters. And that's how they're deploying them.
Yeah, and I do that we've...
and mandating it, mandating poisoning. I've never heard such a crazy thing. I have received footage of people getting their free fire ant bait or free poisons and putting that poison on blue-banded bee nests, thinking that they're ant nests, and saying, oh, bees are flying out. Now, I spoke to the fire ant poisoning program initially when this started. The guy said, we don't like bees, we don't like honeybees, we're glad Varroa is here because now we're going to have less hollows, they're not going to take up the hollows of trees in national parks. It's going to be better for lorikeets. Anyway, the guy told me that and I said, well, your food's going to get a bit more expensive, anyway. I didn't bother, I'm not actually a fighter, so I let him go. I said, what about indigenous bees? He said, what? I go, what about ground nesting indigenous bees? I go, there's ground nesting indigenous bees? I'm like, you're the Invasive Species Council and you don't know that there's ground nesting indigenous bees? And they didn't. I said, have you surveyed the areas that you're poisoning to see what indigenous bees live in these areas? And they said, no. I go, can you show me any scientific studies you've done to show that these poisons aren't going to cause harm to the environment? No. And it's psychopaths have just gone out very early in the fire ant program, poisoning program. What we did was we tested the waters. We only raised $9,000 or something. We spent, maybe 4,000 of that on water testing, and we found out that the rivers were contaminated, or the creeks in Sanford, and that lungfish live in these rivers. Water dragons were sick on the side of the water. You could see the pellets in the creek. The program apologised, and then they said, well, next time we're going to use S-methoprene instead. And then I read the directions of S-methoprene and it says don't put near aquatic water either. And they go, oh, but we can. We've got a special permit in this case to put it on riverbanks and near the water. The other thing, fire ants don't live in areas that of high altitude and of high vegetation. They live in when you disturb the soils. They live in mulch, they live in hay, you can see people in the areas of Logan selling, topsoil and stuff, and on Facebook Marketplace. People come up and pick it up and drop it off in Byron Bay. But the most telling factor on this topic is Dr. King from America, Josh King, world expert on fire ants, came up with a STEAM method of dealing with them, but he has a long letter that he's written to our politicians, and if you're a good journalist, you'll let me send it to you, and he says the reason why fire ants haven't spread throughout Australia, because they've been here for 30 years or more, and we've spent $1 billion on it, is native ants, and our meat-eater ants and other ants hold the fire ants back. So the best thing we can do is protect our native ants. But these poisons, like all insecticides, are non-selective. That means that they can kill all insects, butterflies, bees, native bees, and then what happens when the insects go? The birds go, the bats go.
The bees. I know that the National Fire Ant Eradication Program has denied that the fire ant treatment that they use does kill bees, particularly in the quantities that they're being used for this program. I mean,
but because that's completely false, and you can do this research easily. You can just ask your AI this. If any of those poisons you've mentioned land on the foliage of trees and any of the bees come in contact with it and take it back to the hive, this is honeybees we're talking about, then it's an insecticide. The bees they won't die immediately, but they'll slowly halt. And there's many examples of people who've lost hives thanks to that poison. The other thing is, there's a recent announcement that they should never have used the poisons on organic farms, and there probably will be a class action in response to that. So you can read that information on Stop the Toxic Fire Ant Program group page.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw the statement put out by the program today. It seems that their concerns were around the corn grit and the I think the soybean oil that they were using, because they were not.
Well, I'm glad you're well versed on that, and that's not lost on me. But yes, they're GMO. They're using GMO products on an organic farm, that repercussions for those organic farmers. A lot of those organic farmers are exporting their products overseas, and they might have gone to Parliament and got special permission to alter organics here, but those same alterations won't be the case overseas, and that could have directly just ruined businesses there by doing that. But you're a clever person. Do you think you should be able to use poisons on organic food?
Well, I was going to say that they've said that the corn grit and the soybean oil not GMO compliant. This could sort of ruin the organic certification of organic farmers, but they're still maintaining that the actual active chemicals that they're using, pyriproxyfen, S-methoxypyrazine, they're still maintaining that there's...
Yeah, but you're a clever person. I'm asking you individually. They might have had some weird legislation move where they could use poisons on organic farms, but do you think those poisons are organic?
I'm not a scientist. I don't know.
No. Well, you don't have to be a scientist. Do you know what organic means?
Sure, but they're maintaining that they don't meet the definition.
Yeah. No, I'm talking to you as a clever person, like a journalist who studied, who can read. The insanity of this is them trying to say that, hey, we can poison your property and you can still call it organic. Like it's a double entendre. It's like, oh yeah, now you can spray your crops with glyphosate, and we've changed the legislation that glyphosate is now organic. How can we be so fooled by that? Like, it's absolutely an oxymoron.
Sure. From your perspective, so the National Fire and Eradication Program still maintains, no harmful effects to bees, to mammals.
Well, you're a journalist. Like, I'll get really angry as you're a journalist if you don't see how ludicrous that is. When their own scientists came out, Dr. Puckett, I asked him that exact question, and he said, Simon, it's an insecticide. These are very dangerous stuff. They kill insects, mate. That was their own sort of shilly guide that they flew out. And I've got the recording of that, if you want me to send it to you. Because I went in and listened to his lecture for an hour and a half. I think, what was your question again? Was that it doesn't do harm. You're saying that the fire ant poison doesn't do any harm? Doesn't do harm to insects, it's an insecticide.
Well, I think when I spoke to Marnie Manning, she said that the levels being used, they present no...
But why, just use your... Sorry, I don't want to be rude to you. Use your brain.
Sure.
If they're going to work on fire ants, they're going to work on native ants. They're going to work on native bees. That's
Sure.
If they didn't work, why are we spending and do harm to fire ants? If they didn't... So she should rephrase it, and she goes, it's worth killing the fire ants and killing a few other things, because in the end it's going to be more beneficial. That's an argument for her. But to say that these poisons do no harm is insanity. It's absolutely...
Because I put this question question to Marnie Manning. She doesn't deny that the fire ant bait causes harm to non-fire ant species. So she acknowledges that there
Oh yeah, well you should follow up on ground nesting indigenous bees.
Sure. So
Will you do that?
Okay, I can ask about
Ground nesting indigenous bees, and also within the article put how many species in Australia are ground nesting. Also put within your article if they have surveyed, done an environmental impact study on the effects of these poisons on native bees, and then also put within this article that I run Save the Bees Australia. So, because I can tell by the questions from the start that this could be a potential hit piece, and I'm doing my best to answer these, and you understand that you're being recorded as well.
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
Because what I was going to say, so Marnie Manning doesn't deny that fire ant bait can harm non-target ant species, but she does deny that at the levels being used, that it can harm bees, birds, dogs, cattle, humans, things like that. From your perspective, why do you think that the program denies this, I guess?
All right, I can simply answer that. Look at the quantities and look at anywhere else in the world. There's no way these poisons should be landing on the foliage of plants. There's videos of huge amounts of poison being dropped by helicopters sporadically. We've got footage, we've got water samples that the poison's been in creeks with high levels. That